Hello, Real Stuff family. You are in for a very enjoyable listen on today's episode of the podcast. And not just because our guest has the best accent of all time, that I could literally listen to them talk for hours on end. Although I have to say that is part of it. You're going to really enjoy listening to this. Mari Llewellyn is an entrepreneur, a content creator. She's the founder of Bloom Nutrition, which is that greens powder brand that I'm sure you've seen all across social media and in loads of stores across the US. And in today's interview, we really go back to her childhood and we hear a lot about some of the emotional dysregulation that was going on in her household as she was growing up, which then later in life led to her having a pretty extreme mental health diagnosis and experiencing a lot of darkness. You might know Mari for her viral post that went live showing her transformation. She lost 90 pounds. We get into the whole story in the episode, but we do talk a lot about that transformation and, some general thoughts around how it feels to talk about weight loss on the internet, especially with the body positivity movement. It's actually a fascinating chat. She opens up a lot in this episode and talks about topics that a lot of people would probably find shameful or difficult to discuss, things about her past. And I am just so in awe of the way Mari opens herself up and talks about these things seemingly with no semblance of shame. And she just kind of tells it like it is. And as I tell her, I think that's very powerful and probably having ripple effects to a lot of listeners. In the episode, we get into the bizarre connection that we have from our childhood. We also touch on her recent fertility struggles, and we go into a really deep dive on the money topic. I don't think I've had a guest on this podcast yet who is the founder of a business that brings in quite as much revenue as Bloom. The figures are kind of astounding. We talk about it in the episode. And we just really dive into her mindset around money and how it's changed or not changed ever since her company had this big transaction that led to her and her husband coming into this huge sum of money as a couple. I love conversations like these because they're kind of equal parts insightful, fascinating, and useful conversations from both a mental health perspective and a business perspective, but they also kind of just feel like two women chatting about life and business in a very casual way. And it is very casual and fun to listen to. I want to say thank you so much to all of you who have been writing written reviews, whether it's on Apple or on YouTube in the comments. I had a recent meeting for my business with a company that I'm hoping to work with in the future, and the person on the call that I was talking to had actually read one of your reviews, and it was really a useful testimonial for her and was one of the reasons why she wanted her company to do work with me. So I really can't emphasize enough how meaningful these reviews have been and everything you've been sharing and all your feedback. For everyone who has written a review and sent me a screenshot of it, I have been replying to you guys with personalized voice notes, thanking you for your time and writing the reviews. And those voice notes have led to some pretty great back and forth conversations and connections with all of you. I don't often just send voice notes in my DM and chat with people directly, but I've had some great conversations out of this, and I love meeting you guys. So please write those reviews, send a screenshot, and let's chat. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. We have lots of great guests coming up, some solo episodes, some audience episodes coming up. I cannot believe we are more than halfway done with season 1 of this show. I'm having the best time. So let's dive in today with Mari Llewellyn. Thanks for coming on. We have a deep-rooted connection that I didn't even know about until you told me.
Yep.
But apparently we went to high school together, and you're how many years younger than me?
I think 1. I think you and your sister were in the grade above me.
And were you in Scarsdale High School the whole time?
The whole time.
How did I not know you?
I can see why you didn't, because I was in a very shy stage of my life. Like, I had moved from the UK in 5th grade, and Scarsdale was kind of overwhelming for me. Like, it was much more of a culture shock than I anticipated, and I think I was very much still finding myself until like senior year.
Well, I was friends with a lot of shy people. I mean, I was the president of the drama club. So I'm just shocked our paths didn't cross.
I know. And now I'm married to someone from Scarsdale.
Exactly. I didn't know Greg either.
That's crazy.
I know. And listen, we have a bit in common. So we're both from this town in Scarsdale, and we're both either I'm not fully Jewish, you're not Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
It's a predominantly Jewish town.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard from consuming some of your content that growing up for you was a time of emotional tumult in a lot of ways. And I know you were moving around a lot from the UK to, was it Switzerland?
I lived in Switzerland age 1 to 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then back to the UK, then to Scarsdale. Definitely a culture shock moment.
Yeah.
Can you go back to your childhood a little bit? I'd love to hear just a little bit about your upbringing and your relationship with your family and your parents and all that.
Yeah. So I was born in London, and my parents had been trying to have me for like 3 years. So I was kind of, I don't know, the way they put it is like I was like this miracle baby for them because they'd been trying for so long. And now that I'm like on my fertility journey, I can relate to that so much more.
Mm-hmm.
My dad worked for the British Foreign Office, which is kind of like the UN. He's a lawyer, so he was moved around a lot. We moved to Geneva when I was 1 year old. I don't remember living in Switzerland, but I have a younger sister named Anna. I say my childhood was in a way very picturesque, but also not, because I was growing up outside all the time, you know, playing imaginary games. We traveled a ton. Like I really was pretty blessed with the childhood that I had. But I think there was a decent amount of emotional dysregulation in my household. And I have gone through different stages of how I feel about that. And I'm kind of at the place of like, I have so much more understanding around it now that I just feel bad that my parents didn't have the tools that I have now. So looking back, it was definitely a little bit of an explosive, like bottle things up, then explode, bottle things up, then explode type of household. So that's what I witnessed. I moved to New York age 10. So it was 2004. And I remember having this perception of America that it was going to be just like Friends, like the TV show. So that was,
don't we all wish?
I was expecting like hamburgers, hot dogs, Friends. That was all that I knew. And we, you know, the UN put us in Scarsdale. Like they decided where we lived, basically.
Oh, wow.
So we were put in a house of the ex-British diplomat on Murray Hill Road. That was our first house.
One of the roads with a lot of big mansions.
Really big mansions. And it was my first time seeing wealth like that, honestly. And I was kind of taken aback. And then, you know, Scarsdale, as you said, predominantly Jewish. I felt like there was a really tight-knit community there. I had met one Jewish person my whole life. So I had no understanding of what that was, had a hard time integrating myself into the community. I, you know, had a very different upbringing. And I think within, you know, I did make a couple friends. I remember one of my first friends she was Jewish, and I went to my first Shabbat and went to my first Bat Mitzvah. And it was such a like, what is happening moment. So yeah, I've definitely experienced a lot of different cultures. I've moved around even more since that time. And Scarsdale was hard for me, but also I'm married to someone from Scarsdale. Like it has brought me a lot of like great opportunities, and people there definitely work really hard. And I could go on, but that was my childhood.
I wish that you, me, my husband Michael, and your husband Greg could rewind to high school and just all get together in the library one day and chat.
I know. Isn't it funny to think about? Like
so crazy.
What makes a relationship last that long? You know what I mean?
We can get into that because that is something I had a model of from my parents who were together since middle school. And then they actually went to different colleges, but got back together and considered themselves high school sweethearts. And so when I was with Michael, pretty much my whole time being long distance in college with him, it didn't feel like this new adventure I was embarking on. It felt like I know this can work if I want it to work because I've seen it work before.
Wow, I can't believe you did long distance all through. That's amazing.
Okay, you know, I want to go back to something you said about that childhood house with the emotional dysregulation and the explosiveness. How was that manifesting? Was that coming more from one parent or the other?
It was arguing between them. And I think what's tough in families, and I see this happen with other people, is this kind of dynamic where one child goes with one parent and you kind of take sides, and that can be really difficult. My parents ultimately did separate when I was in junior year of high school. So yeah, it was arguing between them. They were definitely trying their best. Like that's something that I've had peace with, and I've realized over time they were doing the best that they could, but I don't think that they were the right people for each other. And ultimately it ended up being a situation where me and my sister were hearing too much, probably too much information. And that's something I've really taken into my adulthood. You know, I don't have kids yet. I'm so looking forward to that because I feel like I know exactly what I don't want to do. And even like with Greg now, if we're having an argument, even if we're around friends or anything, like we run a business together, we keep everything private in a way.
And I know your dad has been very instrumental in supporting you. And my understanding is that when you first started one of your companies, that it was run out of his attic.
Yeah.
Do you have that similar relationship with your mom?
No, I didn't always. We definitely butt heads more, I would say, in my childhood, but as of recently have been closer. I just think the older I get, the more my perception changes about, you know, like family relationships. And I never want to lose time with people. So yeah, we've had ups and downs for sure. And I think also my family is not particularly entrepreneurial. And I think British culture is quite different to American culture. That's something I've had to wrap my head around. I feel like my parents were not nearly as involved as many of the parents were in Scarsdale. Like they had no idea what I was doing at school. They didn't understand SATs. They had no idea what was going on when I applied for school. Like I was truly on my own. And in the same vein, like they don't really understand my business. And at first I found that quite frustrating. And I really wanted to like show them that I could do something great. Like I think that was a part of my motivation, honestly, at the beginning. But I've really come to peace with like, they don't need to understand my career necessarily. Like they can just appreciate me for who I am.
You know, in recent years, I found myself butting heads with my mom more than I ever did as a teen. I felt like as a teen, we never did at all. And I've shared on this podcast before that my mom and I did therapy together this past year a few times with my therapist. And it was really healing and it was lovely and a good experience. I don't know if you did that with your mom, but I'm curious what has been the changing factor? Is it you sort of releasing a desire to control what the relationship looks like, or you being in therapy yourself?
I think both. Like you just said it perfectly. I think me sorting through my emotions in therapy. I mean, I've been in therapy since I was 14. I've obviously used different therapists, but like, you know, talking about that relationship and sorting through my feelings on it, and even sharing. Like I don't share everything about her necessarily because my family, you know, they're still out there. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but sorting through that and then also letting go of expectations and kind of meeting people where they're at has been really, really helpful for me. And sort of just having a more like long-term vision of what I want our relationship to look like rather than being frustrated in the moment.
It is hard as a content creator to share so much about personal people in your life. I mean, that specific story about me doing therapy with my mom is something that I got multiple rounds of clearance from her before I said it, because I wanted to make sure she was comfortable with me sharing that. Not just parents, but if there's anyone in your life, friends, siblings, coworkers that you're having trouble with, you can't just come on and slam them and open up about everything to your social media audience because they're maybe watching.
Oh, 100%. And you don't want to like get in the way of that healing process. But at the same time, like I feel like I'm sure you feel this way too, a big part of my purpose is to share. So it's hard, but I feel like I've done a reasonable job at keeping it like vague but still discussing, because I do think there's a lot of people listening who maybe have had tough relationships with their mums and it's not that common. Maybe from my perspective, I always see like, you know, daughters who are best friends with their mum and they're together all the time, and it's quite sad in a way. So I feel like sharing makes people feel less alone.
I saw your face when I said that I did therapy with my mom. And if people are watching on YouTube, they would have seen your face as well. And it was one of those faces of, oh, wow. You know, and then I said, did you do that with your mom? And we got a head shake. Do you think that's ever something that she would engage in with you if you wanted to?
No.
No.
I mean, possibly, but I just don't think we're there yet.
Keep in mind, I said no to that question too. And
Did you?
she surprised me.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, why do you think mother-daughter relationships can be so complicated? Like, what is it about that relationship?
I think I won't know until I'm a mother, to be honest with you. I think that's going to be a whole new level of healing for me. But I think potentially it's because they see themselves in us, and that complicates things. I think it's almost like watching ourselves do something that we don't like. And it's like this weird psychology moment of, you're making me mad, but really I'm mad at myself, you know?
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. It's, I don't like that I'm doing this, but you gave this to me, so I'm going to take it out on you.
Yes. Yes. 100%.
And listen, I have a kid, but I mean, he's a 2.5-year-old boy. I have a daughter on the way. So maybe with a girl, I'll learn something new about the mother-daughter relationship. You know, a lot of people say when they have their kid that the moment the baby came, they viewed their mom differently, or their relationship with their mom changed. And I didn't necessarily feel that. And I wonder if it's because he was a boy, or if it's because he's too much of a baby. Like, maybe I will feel a lot of the same things as he grows and as time goes on.
I have a friend who has a baby girl, and she's had issues with her mother relationship. And she said that it was really life-changing for her with the perspective she has for her mom. So potentially, by the way, congratulations. I'm so excited for you. And your baby's so cute.
Thank you. If people don't know you and don't follow you, you have this whole epic transformation story of how your life changed and your health changed. On this podcast, we do try to stick to the taboo topics that haven't been talked about elsewhere. And I know people can even go to your own YouTube channel and watch your transformation journey video. But for people who are like, but I haven't seen her on the internet, which you probably have, she's got millions of followers. But if you haven't, can you give the Spark Notes version of your major transformation?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Spark Notes. Let's go. I mean, I've told this story so many times at this point. I feel like I can script it out.
You've got it. You've got it down.
College was a really dark time for me. A lot of mental health issues, drinking, partying, eating badly. I was on a lot of different medications for my mental health. Had to drop out of school a semester before graduating, gained a lot of weight, had kind of a reality check when I moved home to Scarsdale to my dad's house. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I don't have a degree. I don't have a job. And, had this light bulb moment of self-awareness. And I was like, this is because of me, and I need to get myself out of this. My boyfriend, now husband, has been bodybuilding for years, and I was very inspired by him and kind of felt like fitness would be my way of gaining back control of my life. But it did so much more than that. I completely fell in love with health, nutrition, from a mood perspective. Like, mostly it just made me feel so much better. And then as a bonus, I was losing the weight that I had gained, and ultimately lost 90 pounds by November of 2017. And that was a kind of big moment for me. I didn't have a career before that point. I did finish my degree. I was working at the front desk of Orange Theory Fitness and posted that before and after photo. And that was what started my career. And now I'm sitting here, and it's kind of insane.
Wow. Going back to those college days and when you were at your absolute lowest, and we can get into your borderline personality disorder. You did have a mental health diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
But before the diagnosis, do you feel like you can pinpoint anything that was going on in your life, or anything that was happening in those early college years or even late high school years that led to you not feeling your best and kind of acting out in whatever ways you were?
I think that's taken me years and years to unravel, because, yes, there were things I could have pointed to, in the moment in college. It was, I was going through this breakup or this and that. But having years to reflect, I think it was so much about my childhood and just bottling everything up. Like the anger I had, the sadness I had around it, kind of almost like a grieving period around my family being split up and feeling like, are we even going to talk anymore? And all the fighting in the household, and kind of realizing that maybe I didn't have as great of a childhood as I thought, and just kind of this crazy like internal pain that I felt. And I learned later on that borderline personality disorder is a trauma-based disorder. So it's not something you're born with, it's something that develops from trauma, kind of like PTSD, which gave me a lot of clarity around why this happened. And I do think I had a predisposition for depression and anxiety. It runs in my family. I can see it on both sides. But I think college for me was more so, it gave me all these unhealthy ways of coping. So all the anger and sadness I had felt all those years kind of came out. Like drinking allowed me to get angry and sad and show all my feelings, and, partying and making sure I was never alone. Like that was a huge thing for me. Living in a dorm, being surrounded by friends, partying, boyfriends, like this was all new stuff for me. I didn't really party in high school, maybe like senior year I did. But these were ways of like numbing how I felt. And it just gradually got worse and worse and worse. So I kind of think about it in that way rather than like what was happening at school, if that makes sense.
Do you identify with having gone through in your childhood a big T trauma, or is it more just, would you say it's more of a little T trauma of all of the chaos in the house?
I think it was repeated little T emotional kind of neglect over and over again. I also think a lot of my memories are blacked out, to be honest with you, because I find that when I do therapy, like that's kind of a big thing for me, is that I dissociate. Like that's a tool of mine when I'm stressed or having an emotional conversation. I kind of check out and I like leave my body. Like that's something people will do, especially with BPD. And I think I was dissociated for a lot of my childhood, and you can't store memories when you're dissociated. So I do think that there's a decent amount that I don't remember. But I also want to say BPD is not a permanent diagnosis. I think when I was diagnosed, that was a big misconception that I had, because when you researched it, it was like, oh, you have this forever. No therapist wants to work with people with BPD. It's a very selfish diagnosis. Like I read all these horrible things about it and felt kind of like a monster. Like it was a very weird time for me, but at the same time, I felt very relieved. But now I don't even meet the criteria for BPD because I've done all the work to kind of work my way out of it. So I just want to say for anyone listening that may have that diagnosis, like it is, I don't want to say reversible, but you can change your lifestyle and work your way out of it.
Can we unpack the words in that diagnosis? Borderline personality disorder. What does it even mean?
Yeah, I think it's a horrible name for the disorder, actually, because it sounds different than it is. Like it sounds like multiple personality disorder. It sounds like borderline of what?
Yeah, it's not very clear.
It's not very clear, and it's worse. Like it sounds scary, and I don't like that about the diagnosis.
What would you rename it?
Really strong feelings disorder.
Okay.
Super sensitive disorder. The way I always described it was like having third-degree burns on your emotions. So like,
wow,
someone, like for example, like going to the grocery store, if I had like a bad interaction with a cashier, which now I would be like, oh, that was weird, and move on with my day. I'd be like, wow, like that person hated me. What's wrong with me? What did I do? It would be this internal kind of spiral. Also struggle with a lack of identity, kind of feeling like this empty hole inside and not knowing who you are, or, what you like about yourself. It's just sort of this empty hole. Needing to be around people constantly, like being alone was really challenging. Self-harm is very common with people with BPD because you kind of want to just feel something. That's a very taboo topic, I think, self-harm. But like that's a difficult thing to explain because I did it for many years and now I couldn't even dream of doing something like that. But at the time...
And when you say that, you mean cutting?
Yeah,
okay.
That was what I did. And I still have scars from it. It's very difficult for me to like feel like that was me. Like it's kind of crazy to me that I would ever do that to myself. But in the moment, you're in so much pain internally that you want to like, it's almost like this shock factor that makes you feel better. Almost like when you cold plunge, like this crazy thing that brings you back down to earth, and it almost helps in a way, but it's also incredibly dangerous. So that was a big reason why I ever was put on medication. The borderline word, I think, comes from black and white thinking, because people with BPD tend to think very black and white. There's no gray area. It's like I either love this person or I completely hate them, and it can switch like this.
When you say that it's a trauma-related disorder and you describe it as third-degree burns on the emotions, it makes me wonder, and I don't know if this is too personal of a question, but do you attribute the trauma to some things with your mother from your childhood?
Hmm. This is probably the moment where I'd say I wouldn't want to answer it.
Okay.
But I think it's from a few things.
And by the way, I understand also it's probably complicated to answer that and or talk about that given that you're on the upswing.
Yes, exactly. Like it's difficult to put myself back in that space. But yeah, I would say like a culmination of things from my childhood probably led to that. I feel strongly about talking about the disorder because I think it's not commonly spoken about. And it's like a very painful thing to go through. I mean, it controlled my life for many years.
I think for so many people who have the disorder or even don't have the disorder but maybe know someone who does, to see someone like you, a strong, confident business owner, successful, beautiful woman who is very comfortably talking about it is pretty amazing. I think that's just putting that out there first.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm curious if that diagnosis has ever seeped into or affected your relationship with Greg, which sounds like it's been going on for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely did. Like, for sure. At the beginning of our relationship, yeah, I mean, I've had moments where I'm like, how did he make it through that with me? Because I was kind of, what's the word? Like, I would have scared myself because I was so impulsive and the emotions were all over the place. And BPD really affects interpersonal relationships and especially the people you're closest to.
Was he at Drexel with you?
Yeah, he was.
Oh, okay.
Which was completely random. We didn't meet in high school. We met at Drexel.
Oh, wow.
I know. So somehow I didn't know him either.
Huh. I mean,
Yeah.
just to clarify for people, maybe why I didn't know you, our high school had maybe 500 kids per grade.
Yeah, it kind of was a lot, right?
It was big.
Yeah, it was a lot for sure. And like even I hadn't met until Austin.
She's a grade below you, right?
No, she's in my grade.
Oh, so if you're grade, then you're 2 grades below me.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah. Did you graduate in 2016? Sorry, from
yes.
college?
Yes, 2016.
Yes. Okay, so I was 2014. So yeah, 2 grades. Okay, it makes a little more sense.
Okay, yeah, you were okay. Got it. Well, I knew you because you were a twin, and I feel like twins always stand out. Do you know what I mean? What was I saying? I feel like he was the first person who was like, I think you need to go to a psychiatrist because I don't, you're clearly in a lot of pain. I want to help you. And he would actually drive me to Philly to go to group therapy, DBT, every week. And he was like a big support system for me. But at the same time, like both of us were kind of a mess back then. Like when I think about my early 20s, like both of us were really unsure of ourselves and our goals in life. So we very much grew together. But eventually he learned a lot of the tools that I was using in DBT, like holding ice was a big one because instead of self-harming, you want to do something that's kind of a shock to the system, but not hurting, right? So holding ice, helping me breathe, holding me, taking me on a walk, getting me outside. He did a lot of those things back then. A big struggle for me at the beginning was like, how come he doesn't understand the pain I'm experiencing? And I remember my therapist saying, like, you can't expect him to understand your reality. That was a good learning lesson for me. And same way I can't understand his reality necessarily.
Was he ever one of the people that you flipped on and said, I don't need you?
Probably.
And did you guys break up at any point?
Yeah, we broke up a few times in college. Yeah.
Do you feel like it was because of the diagnosis or maybe just because of college life?
I think it was both, honestly. Like, I think, yes, I was in a particular era of my life at that point. I don't think the drinking helped, but it was like both of us, I don't think either of us were really ready for that serious of a relationship, but we were so like best friends from the minute I met him and just truly like felt like we were soulmates. So it was difficult to try to make that work. And on top of all this stuff happening at college, we broke up once or twice. But then when we got back together, it was like, we're doing this.
And at the point when you were realizing that you weren't feeling your best, and I guess that would have been the point when you were at your heaviest weight and your health was declining, was your decision to go through that big transformation and to start reading everything you can about nutrition and exercising and strength training, would you say that was purely 100% about wanting to feel better and wanting to not feel the way you were feeling? Or was there a part of it that was vanity related and that felt like, I don't like the way I look?
It's a good question. I feel like, so for context back then, during that time, I very much self-isolated. I cut off a lot of the friends I had because they were like my party friends, and that's what they knew me for. So I was really by myself. I had Greg, I had my dad, but that was kind of it. And I didn't post on social media, didn't take any photos of myself, probably because I was insecure about the way I looked. And something the mental health medication did was sort of numb me. And I wasn't really aware of reality. You're kind of living in this like very flat way of life. And honestly, I didn't really notice that I gained weight until quite far in because I wasn't really aware of myself. I know that's difficult to explain, but like I just wasn't aware of myself or my surroundings. And when I started the fitness journey, I wasn't posting it. It wasn't about that. It wasn't for other people. It definitely was like majority feeling like I was disappointed in who I was at that point, wanting to get the control, wanting to be a strong, hardworking person. And I think, yes, a part of it was I want to look better and feel better in my body as well. I wasn't proud of who I was, but I wouldn't say a majority of it was coming from wanting to get smaller. If anything, it was like, I really want muscle. That was a big thing for me. Like I really admired female bodybuilders. I thought it was really cool. I think because it's such a display of like hard work, because gaining muscle is really difficult. So yeah, I think a mixture of both.
You've probably run into it on social media with the whole body positivity movement, that when people post transformation videos, specifically weight loss videos, that there can be some hate around it of just love your body and it's not about how you look, it's not about the number on the scale, whatnot. And as someone who worked at Refinery 29, that message of body acceptance and, you know, Refinery 29 is a place that would probably never share your weight loss transformation, just for example. Knowing that you genetically kind of started out in a smaller body and then you got to that stage and went back. I'm curious if you ever question whether the journey that you went on is actually an attainable journey for someone who has different genes to begin with, someone who has a completely different body type and maybe started out a heavier weight and then did everything you did, but just this is their body type. No matter what they eat or how they work out, this is how they look. I'm curious if that type of friction or feedback is something you've gotten from anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely gotten hate, like I for sure throughout my career. And I kind of think, you know, I give advice to other girls who get it. And I'm like, if you're doing anything worthwhile and making an impact, like there's going to be negativity and it's just part of it. And it kind of is like, would you rather dull, I hate this quote, so like millennial, but dull your shine, or do something big and have people not like it? Like that's kind of a part of it. And I also just feel like with the body positivity piece, I never intended to say publicly like, hey, I lost 90 pounds, you should too, or you can too. It wasn't really about that for me. I think people associate me with that because of the before and after photo. And unfortunately, that's what gets people's attention. People love a before and after, whether it's like skin, weight, whatever it may be. So people think that I'm this like weight loss advocate, but for me, it's not really about that. I'm so passionate about the way health makes me feel, like food. I'm such a big nutrition person. I feel like food is medicine and it changed my life. And I also have learned so much through my own podcast, having experts on the show talking about things that could be inhibiting weight loss, like estrogen dominance or people who have a hard time with insulin, or there's so many issues nowadays with gut health. Like there's so many layers to it. You know, I've been going through this hormonal acne journey for a few years now. And I think everyone has like a thing. Like every time I feel badly about my skin, I'm like, everyone has a thing. Like maybe for me, it's not as difficult to lose weight, but my skin shows everything. Like if I have dairy or I'm having alcohol, like it will come out of my face. And uncovering the inner reason for that has taught me so much about like the toxins we consume nowadays. And sorry, I'm going on a whole tangent, but yeah, I do think bio-individuality, meaning like everyone's so different, is such a thing.
No, and I appreciate that. And I also agree. I say that all the time about how everyone has a thing, and something that's just not a problem for you or was never an issue for you is someone else's biggest struggle. And honestly, really good example of that, which is about us, is that I got pregnant the first time I tried, both times.
No.
And I have plenty of friends that have infertility, struggle with fertility issues, have to do IVF. And listen, I have other problems that I deal with. I have celiac disease. I had to get my gallbladder removed. I've also had acne. You know, I've had other things.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that can be sensitive when something that is your hardest thing is just not a problem for other people.
It's so true. Like, you know, when you have acne, all you see is other people's clear skin. Or when you struggle with weight, all you see is perfect bodies. It's kind of like you hyperfixate on it, even if no one else really notices. And the fertility piece is such a big one. I think like now with social media, we're so aware of everyone else's timeline and journey that it's really difficult to kind of trust the process and stay positive in our own timeline.
Yep.
But I'm glad we're talking about it because I think the fertility thing is becoming so common.
Yes.
You know, and it's kind of alarming for our generation.
I also have to say, as I'm having this conversation with you, and by the way, I've shared on my social media that both times I tried, the first time that it was successful. So I've said that before. But in full transparency, saying it to the face of someone who is going through infertility was difficult to say. Because it feels like, although I know it's not a me versus you or my chances don't affect your chances, it just feels like I'm saying something mean or like I'm rubbing something in your face or like it's not the right thing to say. And of course, this is the platform to say everything because this is the point of the podcast. But I am curious how you feel, honestly, when you hear someone say that.
I had a friend the other day tell me that she was pregnant. And the way she did it was so, I could tell she was being so careful and wanted me to know before we were in a group setting because she was worried about my feelings, which I so appreciated. But I was so excited for her. Not 1 ounce of me was angry or upset. If anything, because she had been struggling a little bit too, it gave me hope. I was like, oh, well, she has been struggling for this long. Like it will happen for me too. And I don't know. I've actually spoken with my mum and some other people who struggled with fertility, and they were like, oh, I was so angry every time other people got pregnant, which I could understand. I'm not there yet. If anything, I'm just excited, and I still love watching pregnancy content and baby content. I feel like Greg and I haven't been trying long enough to where I'm like upset when other people talk about it.
How long has it been?
I would say it's been about 4 months at this point, because the first couple months we didn't really know what we were doing and I wasn't timing things correctly. So we would say about 4 months. And there was a little bit of a shock of like, I really expected this to happen right away because I'm so health conscious. And I thought, yeah, like easy, it shouldn't be a problem. If anything, it makes me curious because I am so health obsessed that when I hear people get pregnant right away, I'm like, why? Like, I want to know the reason. And I know I probably will never know the reason. I think a lot of this journey is teaching me to let go of control because I am kind of a control freak with that sort of thing. But to answer your question, no, it doesn't upset me yet. It's more like I'm curious, if that makes sense.
I have a friend who got pregnant accidentally, but was just about to start trying, but it was an accident before her older sister, who has been going through infertility for maybe 5 years.
Wow.
And it has really caused a huge rift in their relationship. And from the side of the person who is pregnant, if you have a friend who is struggling, it can be tricky to know what is the right approach to take because obviously there's no right answer.
Yeah.
But people will say the right thing to do is to text them and tell them privately before you do something big in person because you want to give them time to process on their own instead of having to react live.
Yeah.
But I have heard the opposite thought pattern, which is basically that they don't want to be treated different from how you would have told everyone else. And they want to be involved. They don't want you to come single them out and make it feel like you have to temper down their feelings. And so obviously, I think everyone who's in that situation kind of needs to share with their friends and family what they would prefer.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on that?
I prefer the private method because I guess that just happened to me. I really appreciated that she told me privately before a group setting because I would feel like everyone's looking at me being like, oh, is she upset? Like, what is she thinking? And then I got to genuinely say to her, like, this doesn't upset me. Please celebrate as much as you, like, please celebrate, because I can't, like, putting myself in that position, I would be so excited and wanting to celebrate. It's just, it is such an interesting dynamic to have to worry about. But I think the private method is very respectful.
When you say that you've now been trying technically correctly for 4 months, at what stage do you actually go to an OB, and is it considered, I guess, unexplained infertility?
They say after 1 year, but I've already gone to a fertility clinic, in all transparency, because I'm crazy and I'm like, no, this needs to happen right now. Because I feel like that it's a weird thing when you decide you want to have a baby. It's like, oh, this needs to happen now, but it just doesn't work that way always. I feel like our whole lives we're like avoiding pregnancy and terrified it could happen at any moment. And then the second you want it, you're like, hello.
Absolutely. And even though it happened on my first try, it was very much scientific of, I'm tracking on my natural cycles app. Here's the exact day we need to go. We have 24 hours, hop in the bed. Like, it was not a spontaneous love moment where it just happened.
Can I ask you, when you say first try, do you mean like, did you try for a whole month and then realize?
What I mean is that when I came off the pill, I spent a couple of years, maybe a year and a half, using natural cycles as my birth control, and was actively not trying to get pregnant, avoiding having unprotected sex during a specific window of the month when my app told me not to have sex. A big reason for that was because we were going through the genetic testing. I also went to my OB to see if I was up to date on all my vaccines, and she told me I needed an updated varicella shot, which I think is like a chickenpox thing. And she told me, you shouldn't be pregnant when you have this because this is a live vaccine. So I was very much trying to avoid pregnancy for a year and a half. And then the first cycle of my period that I said, this is the month I want to try to get pregnant during this ovulation cycle. It wasn't trying the whole month, but probably for a 5 to 6 day window around the ovulation, basically timed with the Natural Cycles app. I had sex. I switched my Natural Cycles app over from the prevent a pregnancy mode to the plan a pregnancy mode. So then it tells you when to do it.
Yeah.
And I basically had sex all around that fertile window as much as I could. And then it worked. But listen, people have sex at the right time and the right day, and they don't get pregnant for so many reasons. And oftentimes it doesn't even have to do with their body. Sometimes it's the sperm.
100%. Like, that is, Greg has also been, I'm doing all the things. He's doing all the things. He's greatly improved his testing over time. That's also why we don't count the first couple months, because I think we weren't quite there yet. I think women often put it on themselves, and I know I did a little bit. Like, I was in a very bad headspace about it a couple months ago, and now I feel a lot better. It's very mental. And so in terms of the having sex around that window, I don't know if you've heard of this method that everyone's doing. It's by
I'm excited.
I don't want to say the wrong name. Do you mind if I check her name really quickly?
No, go ahead.
Heather McDonald posted on TikTok how to get pregnant.
Okay.
And the method is that you have sex every other day for the entire month, pretty much, until your period.
Sounds fun.
No, it's really not. It's literally not.
Okay, I take it back. Sounds like if someone enjoys every other day sex, sounds enjoyable for a nice orgasm, but not relevant to getting pregnant.
The point of it is so that you always hit the window without, like, a lot of girls will miss their ovulation by accident. So when you do every other day, you end up hitting the window regardless. Didn't work for us this past month, and I felt like a breeding cow. So I don't know if I'd recommend.
Yeah, how did your vagina feel after that month?
We looked at each other and we were both like, we don't want to do this anymore.
You're like, get your hands off of me.
I'm like, look, please just get it over with. Like, oh my God. Like, neither of us wanted to do it. It got tedious. And I don't know if that's really the best mindset to be in around.
Yes.
Because you want to be calm. You want to be chill. You want to be like enjoying it. Perhaps it's worked for some people. I think I'm in touch enough with my cycle that I don't really need to do the every other day method, but I just wanted to share for anyone.
I think that method was probably born out of and can be helpful for someone who, as you're saying, has a completely irregular ovulation cycle. Because if you are maybe ovulating on day 8 of your cycle and sometimes it's day 21 and you just don't know, and you're also not using any sort of tracking device or any way to tell, I can see how you could just say, every 24 hours or 48 hours, we'll see what happens. But I mean, I don't know if this is a myth. I have heard that if you do that too often, that it can actually decrease the amount of sperm or healthy sperm that are actually being sent out per load. I hate to use that word.
I know.
But I don't know if that's true, but I do feel like, and this isn't advice for you on how to get pregnant or to anyone, but I do feel like I would further, if I was talking to my sister, for example, and she was asking me what I recommend, I would first suggest figuring out your own cycle and trying to see if your body is on a recurring cycle of any sort.
Yeah.
Because something that's interesting about my cycle, at least the first time I got pregnant, I had, and for people who don't know, a standard, quote, normal period cycle is about 28 days. And you ovulate on day 14. And it can, it can be day 12, it can be day 16, whatever, but it's usually the middle of the window. And if you get your period around day 28, that's kind of a standard cycle length. When I came off the pill and my period cycle came back, it came back very regularly, but my cycle was actually 40 something days every month. And I would have a period every 40 something days, meaning my ovulation was actually around day 25, 26 instead of day 14. And so it doesn't need to be at a certain time in order for you to get pregnant successfully, but you just need to know when it's happening. And obviously all the factors in your body need to be working in conjunction with that to make it happen.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I would also say for anyone listening, I did the LHP tests for a while, and those weren't particularly effective for me because I feel like the line is confusing. Is it strong enough? Like, what's going on? The digital ovulation tests that you can get from Walgreens, and it just has like a smiley face if you're ovulating. I think those are a lot better and they're quick and easy. I had a false pregnancy alarm actually this past month, like because I take bioidentical progesterone because I don't make enough. Like I have very low progesterone. So between ovulating and my period, so day 14 and 28, I take progesterone. What I didn't know is that you are supposed to stop the progesterone once you have a negative pregnancy test. If you have a positive one, you should keep taking it because it helps to prevent miscarriages. So I kept taking it and it delayed my period by 5 days. So I was certain that I was pregnant. I was like, why else would it be delayed? I had no idea. Right. So that's a whole other thing. Like the period of time where you don't know what's going on is the worst because that's when the anxiety goes up. That's when you're like, am I not? That's when the disappointment happens. So that's the tough phase. I feel like for people listening who have had fertility struggles, thinking you're pregnant is not fun. I've each month learned to kind of detach from the result. I'm not a particularly woo-woo spiritual person, but I was at such a bad point with this a couple months ago that I spoke to a soul reader. Something about that conversation just made me feel a lot better about the timeline of it. She was explaining that the baby is here and waiting for the perfect moment, and it will happen when I'm relaxed, maybe late in the summer. And just like hearing that helped me let go. You know,
I love that.
It was really helpful. I'm not saying that I'm completely sold on everything, but it just was like, oh, okay. Like I'm trying to force something right now. Like I was like living month to month to month, like waiting for the answer. And I was like, I can't keep living like this, and letting go of the timeline a little bit. Same way we were talking about like weight loss. We're all on our different timelines, and kind of letting go of I need to get pregnant right now has been really helpful for me.
My twin sister Allie recently had some neck spine surgery, and her doctor told her, make sure when you get home from the hospital you are staying hydrated. So I gave her a few of our LMNT electrolyte packets. She does not have them. She's never tried them before. And Michael and I over here are fully stocked up at all times because we have a subscription to LMNT. So I gave her a few packets. She put them on her counter and she says she didn't touch them for a few days. But a couple days later, she texted me saying that just as she was having her husband change the bandage for the first time on her neck, she got a little woozy and lightheaded. And as soon as she started feeling like she was going to faint, she poured the Element packet into a glass of ice water and drank it. And she said it was like immediately she felt a lot better. So when I'm drinking Element, it's not typically for emergencies. Like I feel like I'm going to faint. I just use it as a tasty way to boost my hydration during the day. And I can't help but think if it had that effect for her in the moment, like literally made her go from feeling like she's going to faint to feeling good, just imagine what this is doing for your body when you're feeling good and how much it's just supporting you and helping you. Michael and I are absolutely obsessed with Element. We love all the flavors. My personal favorite, grapefruit salt, and the hot one, the chocolate salt that you put in hot water. So good. We drink at least one a day, each of us, and it's been amazing for staying hydrated during pregnancy. I cannot emphasize that enough. You can get a free sample pack with any Element drink purchase at drinklmnt.com/realstuff. And I highly recommend, if you haven't tried it yet, try out their new Element Sparkling, which is a 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. I used to just put the Element packets in seltzer and sparkling water, so now it's done for me. So tasty, so good. Again, go to drinklmnt.com/realstuff to get your free sample pack. I want to shift gears to money for a little bit.
Money.
And first of all, you grew up on one of the wealthiest streets in Scarsdale, but understanding that was for your dad's job.
Yeah.
What was your money mindset when you were growing up that your parents kind of had with themselves and then shared with you and your sister?
Yeah. So we were actually only in the Murray Hill house for a couple of weeks, and then we were put into a different house, and the UN covered the rent of that house. My parents did okay. My dad worked for the UN. That's not like it's not a money-making job. And my mum's an elementary school teacher. So both of them worked my whole life. And they both still work, actually. We didn't grow up with a ton of money, but we were okay. I did not grow up educated about money. We didn't talk about it. I didn't learn anything about it. I'm not a numbers person, as I said before. So I really felt quite like intimidated by the concept. And then growing up in a very wealthy area, I just noticed my parents' attitude, especially my dad's, and he'll admit this. He's heard me say this on the podcast before. He had a little bit of a like, F you attitude towards wealthy people. And I think it comes from him growing up in a working class family in Wales, not a lot of money. And he sort of had this like disdain towards wealthy people. And I witnessed that growing up, like him saying, oh, we'll never be like them. They're so fancy and posh. And it's sort of this like humor around it. And so I never thought that it was meant for me. Like I didn't think that I would be a financially successful person. Even in college, I was on a debit card that I would overdraw constantly. I didn't even understand credit cards because credit cards in the UK are not encouraged. And when I met Greg, he was like, what, what's happening here? Like, you need a credit card. What's going on? So I was really, really ignorant, honestly, to finances. And Greg's family is very business oriented. They talk about money all the time. They talk about business all the time. And I've learned a ton through them and through Greg. And honestly, I feel lucky to have him in my corner because it's still difficult for me to understand. So yeah, I think a level of ignorance and a level of like not thinking it was meant for me. I've learned a lot over the past few years owning my own company and making more money than I had anticipated.
Do you feel like if it weren't for Greg or someone else in your life who was entrepreneurial and came from that background, that you would have launched into being so entrepreneurial?
It's a good question because I never was passionate about business or being an entrepreneur, but I do think like I was not an academic person. I didn't really love sitting behind a desk. I wasn't like a typical, I don't know, I never loved the idea of working for someone else. So I kind of think accidentally I became pretty entrepreneurial. And I think, so I was a design and merchandising major at Drexel, and it taught me a ton about advertising, product design. And that's everything that I do with Bloom now, like attention to detail on labels, marketing, what message are we sending? I love writing and copywriting. So all of those things were very, very useful for me. Greg definitely brought a marketing skill and a kind of a money mind to it that I don't think I had, but he didn't have the skills of community and branding. So I think without each other, we wouldn't have been able to launch the business.
Just to get people up to speed, and now I'll give the SparkNotes version here. When Mari and Greg first started selling these little workout guides. They were selling them for $5. People would PayPal you just to buy the guide. That turned into new guides, selling meal plans, a lot of digital products, which then ultimately led to your first physical product, the resistance bands, which you sold out 1,000 units within 24 hours. And at this point, you had kind of a community, which is when you started the powder brand and you started Bloom. Yeah. Bloom sells protein powders and greens powders and loads of other stuff. Fast forward lots of years and lots of hard work. Today, I saw an article from a business source that was saying that all of your combined businesses, which is now, the Mari Fitness app, which has become Slay and Bloom, and I don't know if do you have another business?
Pursuit of Wellness, I guess.
Pursuit of Wellness podcast. That all of your combined businesses are now bringing in a combined 8-figure net profit. And then I saw another article that said 9-figure net profit. So we've gone from $5 shareable PDFs to tens of millions of dollars. 9 figures, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah.
At what point along this journey did you have the realization that, I actually did get to the point that my dad said, we're never going to get there? In fact, I've probably surpassed it.
I feel like I still haven't fully wrapped my head around it. I think it's something that I actually struggle with fully owning, like walking about in my life feeling like I earned it and I'm this successful person. I have a hard time like embodying that. And I think it's because of the way I was raised. I think the first time I remember at the beginning just like making $100 in a day. I was like, whoa, we're doing something. Like that felt really cool because it was so hands-on. And when you're at the beginning of a business and every single thing you do has an impact, like me posting a story on my Instagram was the reason we made a sale. So I felt very connected to the money I was making. And the bigger Bloom and the business and everything has gotten, you feel this level of like, yes, I know I'm an integral piece of the business, but it's so much bigger than that. And I'm not seeing the numbers every day necessarily. I think that was honestly helpful that I didn't quite know. I just kept going. And I wouldn't say I'm as money motivated as my husband is. I'm a little bit more like emotional, touchy-feely, like I'm doing this because it's my purpose and I feel good about it type of thing. But I think for me, it comes from experiencing things like being able to travel freely, stay wherever I want, have my dream house, my horse. My horse was like a huge purchase for me and such a milestone moment and has brought me so much joy. Like that was a moment where I was like, oh, wow, like I earned enough money to be able to buy myself a horse. And that was my dream when I was 6 years old. I was like saving up my allowance $5 a month to like get a horse. And it happened for me later in life, which I kind of love because I can really appreciate it now.
My manager just told me, she's a horse person too, and she just told me she owns 5 horses. And I think, maybe one of them she leases or something, but she was telling me about the horse world. We got into this whole horse rabbit hole, a horse hole. And she was telling me that her first horse cost $30,000 and the most recent one was, I think, $75,000. Have you ever shared how much you paid for your horse?
I don't think I have. He was $60,000. Yeah, a steal.
A bargain.
So he's a paint horse. Love him to death. He's a big guy. He was with some kids, a family in LA who could no longer afford his medical bills. So he was kind of sitting in a stall for like 5 months.
Oh,
so I know it was sad. And I found him and rode him and I immediately was like, oh, I love this horse so much. So
what's his name?
Bo. Yeah, he's a cute boy. But it did feel kind of crazy because I was like, I'm not, I got into horseback riding as an adult and I didn't know how much horses cost, but these girls at my barn, 16 years old, were riding $1 million horses. So it's a really crazy.
I didn't know they went that high.
The Grand Prix horses are,
Yes. On this note of your business, obviously we all know with a business, there's tons of expenses. And at this point, you probably have loads of employees, people doing all sorts of things. But For the two co-founders who, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys never did any funding.
Not until recently.
Oh, you did it recently.
Moving to Austin, we moved to Austin in January. A huge reason for that was that we partnered with Nutrabolt, which is owned by Doss Cunningham, who owns C4 Energy. So, the yellow can energy drinks.
Mm-hmm.
They invested and bought about 20% of Bloom.
Okay.
So that was the first time we've ever taken outside funding.
And so before that, though, and even up to now, you and Greg are very much the co-founders and the owners, primary stakeholders in this business and these businesses. When you're bringing in that much revenue, but then there's obviously a lot of stuff off the top that needs to be paid, do you feel like the amount that you guys take home just as a couple, do you feel like that's an extravagant, extraordinary amount, or do you feel like it's modest?
For the first couple years of Bloom, when it was just us two, we didn't take anything out of the business. We just kept putting it back in. Honestly, Greg is very risk tolerant. So am I. I'm kind of the person that will say no a lot and be like, oh, hold on. Let's think that through. He will spend a lot of money on marketing because he trusts that we'll make it back. So we were never really the business owners that took a lot out. Honestly, we were living a pretty risky lifestyle for a while because all of our personal money was in this company. So the bigger the company got, the more risk that was, because if something were to happen, that's mine and Greg's money always. And yes, we've lived a great life, and I wouldn't call it extravagant, but we've lived well because of the company and how hard we've worked over the last few years, which is a whole other thing. That's a toll mentally that we've been reflecting on recently, and just how much Bloom has taken over our lives. It's gotten so big. But this recent investment allowed us to take some risk off the table, which was kind of the biggest thing for us. And I think being self-funded and being the sole owner also involves a lot of risk. And I think that's something that people don't really understand. And a reason why people go get capital right away, because they're not willing to risk everything. But we were.
At this point, are you guys more set up as employees where you take home a salary?
Yes, exactly. So if anything, now we're being more budget careful than ever, which is a crazy concept because everyone sees the headline of the $90 million investment and they assume that Greg and I have $90 million, which isn't the case. Yes, it's incredible. And we partner with the perfect people and we live in our dream house and we have our dream life, but we don't have endless money. And now it's a lot more budgeted. So we are, maybe being more careful than we were even before.
Do you feel like when you see money, just any sort of money, hit your bank account and it's like, okay, I have this money now, has your money mindset changed from your childhood where you now think, okay, I have a lot of money, so this is my money now, I'm going to spend it or do whatever I want? Or are you very much a saver or a person who says this money just came in, I think I should invest it and put it away and we should be smart with it?
So I don't actually really look at it, to be so honest with you. I don't look at our bank account.
I love that for you.
Yeah. I don't look at it. And I know, yes, you want to be knowledgeable about how much you make and you want to be independent in your relationship and et cetera, et cetera. I don't look at it. And I don't really want to. I don't know. It doesn't really interest me. I feel like Greg has it handled. I feel like I know enough. I have a team of people who tell me what's good and what isn't good to spend, et cetera. I'm definitely not a saver. I'll say that. However, I know that I'm aware that I don't know everything about money, and I trust our team to invest it and tell us, where everything's going. We have all the retirement accounts set up and all the things we need. So I definitely put my trust in our team to handle it correctly.
But from a personal standpoint, so not the Bloom money or whatever sitting in that account, but the money that comes to you.
Yes.
That Greg is maybe handling, your family money or your joint finances without you knowing what's coming in or what that looks like. Just how do you operate? How do you go around the world when it comes to putting your card down for things, whether it's a dinner or you're paying for a restaurant? Does it ever cross your mind how much you're spending and if it is going over what you have? Or are you really just like, I trust I'm living my rich life now and I can pay for stuff?
I'm living my rich life. So we do actually have a personal team who we agreed on an allowance, a monthly allowance, and they put that in our bank account. And we talk about like personal decisions with them too.
Oh, interesting. These are people that work for Bloom.
No, they
Oh.
actually work for us personally.
Oh, I
So
love this. What kind of company is this?
it's called Crescit. I'm giving them a plug right now, but they started working with us after the transaction because we all of a sudden had more money and we didn't, we wanted to handle it correctly. So they will invest for you. They'll give you an allowance. We'll talk about big purchases. We just purchased more real estate and they're talking us through that. So that's what I mean when I say I put trust in our team. And we did a lot of research about them and talked to them, talk to references, and we feel really good about them. In terms of how I live my life, I'm definitely the kind of person who's not very attached to money. I feel like it comes, it goes. Maybe that's not the best attitude to have about it, but I don't think about it too much. In terms of like dinners and things, we're not going anywhere crazy. I don't really think about it. I feel like we're pretty generous with the people around us because that's what it's for. In my head, it's like, if you make all this money, like what's the point unless you can experience things with people? We love going on vacations with our friends and flying our families in and things like that. When it comes to like frivolous expenses, that's where I stop and I'm like, is this really worth it? Because, a Chanel bag is what, $10,000, $9,000. Is that just the amount of work that we've put in? Now I'm kind of like, I don't think that that's worth it for me at this point. I feel like if anything, we've become more frugal since the transaction. The transaction itself was pretty tough mentally. It was a year-long process, a lot of ups and downs, not knowing if it was actually going to go through or not. A lot of times, like this whole investment thing is kind of glamorized, but in reality, it's really stressful. So it depends on what it is, but I'm definitely not someone who's really like money obsessed. Does that make sense?
After this $90 million transaction that I can only assume, you don't have to share, but I can only assume that millions of that went to you, which is why you guys were able to / chose to get this kind of personal team to help you with that. Do you wake up the next morning with that money in your bank account and feel any different from how you felt the day before?
Such a good question. And something that we asked a lot of other entrepreneurs when that happened. We were like, well, how did you feel afterwards? It is more of a feeling of relief at that point because the process took over a year. In the meantime, all of our money is in this company. It's such a high stress, high stakes situation. You're putting so much work and time flying back and forth, having meetings, sending them, like they're going through your whole company. It's really stressful. So the day it goes through, yes, like a feeling of happiness and relief, but like nothing really changes. And that's the craziest part about it. It's like you're happy for 2 seconds and you're like, okay, back to work. Like we didn't even really celebrate it, which is crazy. Just, I'm so happy in Austin. I love where I live. I have a good community here. I love my house. And I feel like I'm living this life because of the success of the company and because of the transaction. But nothing changes. And if anything, a lot of entrepreneurs really struggle actually after they sell their company because it's a huge piece of your identity unless you are intentional about not making your business your identity.
Would you ever share how much your house cost to build or buy?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Off
Understood.
air, I will.
I was going to ask though, this reminded me of a podcaster who I love, who's a money coach.
Oh.
And he has a Netflix show, Ramit Sethi.
Yeah.
His money podcast is one of my all-time favorites. And he always says a phrase, which is just confirmed by you right now, which is the way you feel about money is highly uncorrelated to the amount of it that's in your bank account.
Wow.
And he just consistently with his guests, he brings on real people who share openly, every drop of their finances. And it's just proven time and time again, no matter how much money they make, no matter how successful they are, if they felt a certain way, they're going to feel that way no matter how much better they do in life. And it's fascinating to see in your case, not that you felt any particularly strong way about it to begin with, but it's interesting how having this major success doesn't overnight turn you into someone who just all of a sudden feels like loosey-goosey with your spending.
No, it really didn't change much at all. And if anything, like I feel a little sense of imposter syndrome because I never expected to be this successful. And even like having people come to my house or, read an article or whatever it may be, I almost get this feeling of like, eek, it's not really me. I don't know how to explain it. I should be more confident about it and I want to own it more. But it's not a really big piece of my identity. I don't walk around thinking about it at all.
I'm ashamed to say that I've never tried Bloom.
Lucie.
I know.
I'll send you some.
Do you identify more with being a business owner, entrepreneur, or a lifestyle creator?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think that's shifted because I feel like when I first started, I was, I'm an influencer. And then Bloom completely took over my life. And I was fully an entrepreneur day in, day out, meetings all day, at an office 9 to 5. And now I feel like it's shifted back a bit more to being a creator. I think my podcast has really taken over a lot of my life. Like I'm sure you can relate. Like podcasting is a lot more time consuming than people realize. So I do 2 episodes a week and it's my favorite thing that I do. Interviewing, talking, sharing. So I think at heart, I'm a very creative person and I love connecting with people. I'm still involved in Bloom. I'm on every creative meeting, board meeting. Yes, I think I'm entrepreneurial, but I think I'm more of a creator than that. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And in this day and age, having a business that is run by an influencer and a well-known creator has got to be so helpful for the business in terms of getting in stores and selling it.
It's kind of wild how the industry's shifting. Like I think of like Mr. Beast and his chocolate or Emma Chamberlain and her coffee. Yeah. Like having a face and having a story is really powerful and retailers are excited about, certain retailers like Target and Walmart are really excited about having an influencer face. And I'm often flying to Minneapolis and, Arkansas to talk to Walmart and Target and speak with the team and really connect and share the story. I think having a story is really crucial nowadays, especially in the wellness industry. A lot of the supplement companies before Bloom were owned by like investors, people in suits that don't know anything about women's health. And that kind of bothers me a little bit. And I think it's a lot of female business owners too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. We typically have a whole third section on this podcast that dives into sex. I feel like we had so much juicy stuff with the mental health and money chat that we don't exactly have time for a full sex deep dive.
We touched on it.
We touched on the every other day. Yes, I did learn a little bit about that. The real question I wanted to know is, knowing how you two are so tied up in business together, how do you flip from we're working together, this is business mode, to talk dirty to me, I want you to touch me like this?
So it has evolved a lot because when we first met, we were like young and crazy and would do crazy things. And Greg had like I shouldn't say this. No, I can say it. He had a mirror above his bed and like a fur blanket. He was crazy. I was like,
Greg!
What? I know. I walked into his bedroom and I was like, what's going on in here? Like, this is crazy.
Wait, I need to know. Did you ever watch yourself doing it?
Yeah, we have like photos in it.
What did it look like? Was it so fun?
I should find the photo because I feel like I
find those photos.
I was like really feeling myself in the moment, and I'm gonna look back and be like, no, immediately no. So we used to have like we used to be crazy and do whatever, and then when we started the business and it was just us two, it was very much head down, constantly working, and it was a season, like it had to happen.
I thought that was going somewhere else. Head down.
No. To head down on the laptop.
Got it.
Head down on Shopify. We like didn't leave our house for two years or so while it was just us because it took so much work and it was our whole life. And, for the first few years of Bloom, we were still very much running the company together, making every decision together. Every meeting was together. And that was hard on our relationship. And, having a company take over your relationship is difficult, but we somehow made it through. And now I feel like we have such different skill sets. The company's gotten so big that Greg is the CEO, manages the whole team. I don't like managing people. It's not my skill set. I get sad when I have to give people feedback. It's, not my favorite thing. So I very much stick to my thing and he sticks to his thing. And we really don't overlap in our work days anymore, which is really nice. I will say Greg's job is like incredibly demanding and people need him at all hours of the day. I've really put an emphasis on wanting that separation, and he knows that. So we have boundaries around dinner time, no phones, not too much business chat. We take a lot of trips where we really try not to touch the phone. So it's become a lot more balanced, but still Greg is the CEO of a big company. Like it's just kind of part of it at the moment. But I feel much more romantic with him than I did during the depths of Bloom.
I can see how you guys kind of both having different roles within the same company is almost like you have different jobs.
Yeah, it feels like that, truly.
All right, well, I do have more sex questions, but I'll ask you on your personal time.
You'll just text me like, by the way.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a future episode that's just Mari Llewellyn's sex life revealed.
Yes.
Maybe it will be with Greg.
Oh, he would never. He would decline.
So would my husband. So we should get them together. Well, thank you for coming on. We're so excited to see where Bloom goes. I'm excited to try it. I've been eyeing the watermelon flavor. I've been eyeing the pineapple flavor. So do you have a favorite?
I'm going to send you all of them. I think strawberry kiwi is really strong.
Okay.
I'm going to send you a whole variety pack. So you'll tell me what your favorite is.
Okay. Love this. Thank you for coming on. Where can people find you and what's exciting that's coming up?
So they can find me at Mari Llewellyn, Mari. I mean, you'll see the spelling of this title, I'm sure. On Instagram, they can find my podcast at The Pursuit of Wellness. They can shop Bloom on Amazon, Target, Walmart, bloomnew.com. We have a really exciting new product coming. I don't want to say too much, but it's in a completely different space. It's in a can.
I have theories. I'll ask you offline.
I mean, I'm really obvious at this point. Like everyone knows what it is, but I just keep pretending it's a secret. So,
well, we will be very excited to try that, and I won't wait 5 years before I take a first sip of that.
Thank you, Lucie.
Thanks, Mari. Thank you so much for tuning in to The Real Stuff. I'm Lucie Fink. Don't forget to follow the show on social media at The Real Stuff Pod. And if you're liking these episodes, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a written review. It helps the show so much. And if you're feeling called to come on the show, visit luciefink.com/apply and tell us your story. We'll see you next week for another intimate conversation on The Real Stuff.